Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Letter of Law Interviews. We are back after a long, long break. But to make up for the break, we have a wonderful guest with us. We have Miss Megha Mehta, and I'm so excited to be in conversation with ma'am today. Ma'am, first of all, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking time out and being here today.
Thank you, Sarthak. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. A quick introduction about ma'am to the guests who might not know her. She graduated from NLS Bangalore and then worked as a law clerk cum research assistant at the Supreme Court of India with an Honorable Justice of the Supreme Court. After that, ma'am pursued her LLM from Harvard Law School, after which she joined NLS as an assistant professor, where she had a brief stint and is currently an associate at Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas. If you're overwhelmed by all that information, there's more. Ma'am is also a prolific writer and has written for platforms like the Indian Express, NUJS Law Review, EPW, and more. Moreover, ma'am also runs a very fun movie reviews blog on Instagram, which I just came across, and I'm very, very excited to browse through that. So, wow, ma'am, that's a whole lot. Do you ever look back and think, oh my God, I've done all that, and I'm not even 30 yet or something like that?
Not at all. In fact, I always feel like I've not done enough and there's still a lot more that I could do.
Really, what else do you think is there for you left to do?
I don't know. I guess the imposter syndrome never really leaves you in this profession. And I think it's very human to like keep comparing yourself to others and to keep feeling like I don't know where I'm going and I don't know what I'm gonna do after this. And I think that's a constant. So yeah, I'm actually really like kind of in a blank space at this point of my life. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm sure for people who feel that students who graduate from elite law schools have all their life sorted, perhaps, well, everyone appears to be in the
Not
same
at
boat.
all. Not at all. Yeah, I think
Right.
it's the same for everyone. Yeah.
Right. So, for the viewers, today's episode is going to be structured primarily around the law clerk, research assistant, probably, I think, better known as LRs, at the Supreme Court, because ma'am has experience in that, and we've been getting a lot of requests to make a video regarding that. And during the conversation, we'll also try to touch upon ma'am's experiences uh, of her LLM abroad, her teaching experience, and now life as a corporate lawyer. We'll see whether we have the time and space to go into all those areas. So, ma'am, my first question to you is, the general perception is that students who graduate from these top law schools tend to directly go towards the law firm way. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but you chose to first do a clerkship. So, what
Mm-hmm.
what made you consider doing a clerkship right after law school? What were your motivations behind that?
So when I was in law school, I was very sure by my fourth year, like I was doing the 5 year degree, and I was very sure by my fourth year that I want a career in academia. And I specifically wanted to pursue an LLM from a US law school. I did the comparison between UK and US, and I just felt like because I wanted to do feminist legal theory, and at that stage, I was really focusing a lot on sexual harassment, which is also what I'd written my NUJS law review article on. And I felt like the US has more cutting edge scholarship. And there was this professor at Yale Law School I really wanted to study under. I applied to Yale. I got waitlisted, but I couldn't make it through.
Hmm.
And I was advised by seniors that US law schools generally prefer candidates who have work experience. And doing a clerkship helps because having a recommendation letter from a Supreme Court judge obviously looks stellar on your CV. And even otherwise, in the US, clerkships are highly regarded and given a lot of value, even if in India it might be seen differently. Which is why I decided that I was very clear that I just want to go straight for academia. I don't want to spend time in practice or a law firm in between. Which
Hmm.
is why I directly applied for a clerkship in my final year and joined Justice Shantanu Gowda's chamber right after law school.
I see. Ma'am, for the uninitiated amongst us, before we proceed any further, could you briefly talk about what exactly is a clerkship? And before I ask you to talk about that, just a quick heads up, ma'am has written a wonderful, wonderful article on NLS Quirk, I think is the name of the website.
Yes,
I'll
yes.
link that here. So that has some wonderful insights about what the LR-ship entails, and it's written in a very, very engaging and humorous manner. So you might want to check that out.
Right. So basically, a clerkship is being an assistant to a judge. Uh, the exact responsibilities vary a lot depending on what kind of judge you're assigned to. But generally, it involves briefing a judge on all the matters that they will be hearing in court. So every day they get like 50, 60 matters, like minimum. So you have to basically prepare a summary of the SLPs for them and go to them. Either you orally present or you make a note for them which they can read. And it's mainly meant, I mean, they end up going through the whole file anyway, but it's for their convenience so that they know, is this important? Like, is this something that we can like maybe dismiss in like 2 minutes, which is what they do most of the time? Or is this something worth going into and admitting and things like that? That's one. The second thing is assisting them with judgments. Again, it really depends on the judge, because there are many judges who are not comfortable letting their clerks, maybe for confidentiality reasons or whatever. But there are many judges who are okay with like young lawyers coming in and learning that aspect of the process as well. So you basically prepare research notes for them, and depending on how interactive your judge is, you can even have conversations with them, and maybe kind of give them a brief of like what a particular controversy involves, so that they can make up their minds on how they want to decide. And apart from that, there are many miscellaneous responsibilities which could involve helping them draft speeches and things like that.
Yeah.
So you're basically like a shadow to the judge for the entirety of the experience.
Right. Thanks for that answer. There's a lot to unpack and we'll take it step by step. So, ma'am, can we talk a little bit about how should one go about being an LR? I suppose from my research, I figured that there are three primary ways to being an LR. One is the examination that the Supreme
Mm-hmm.
Court conducts. Then people can either apply as an intern and then hope to get absorbed there if there's a vacancy, or people
Mm-hmm.
can directly apply to
Right.
an honorable justice, whoever they want to work with. So can you talk about which of these route you took, and what are the other ways in which students can try to become LRs?
So I took the third route. I knew a senior who was working in the judge's office, and uh, she was the one who recommended my profile. And I'll be honest, I always recommend to people that the second and the third route is your best way of getting in. I'm going to be very candid about this for the benefit of the people who are watching, that it is an opaque process. It is elitist in many ways, because obviously it depends a lot on the connections that you have with a particular chamber, which is why I always advise people that, and I can cover this in more detail, that you need to like go on LinkedIn and find seniors and find people who are in the chambers and try to get an internship so they can see your performance. Because mostly judges will either take somebody who's interned there previously, or they'll take somebody who's applied directly, either through a personal connection or someone who has work experience. I mean, the exam is there on paper, but from what I've heard, a lot of the people who get through the exam don't eventually get absorbed as clerks into a judge's office. There are some judges who take clerks from the registry pool, as it is called, but like I said, it's very opaque. There is no transparency to the process, and I don't think there's any real way of knowing how many clerks are being taken from that exam pool and how many clerks are getting in through connections. But my assessment is that most people get in by interning or through directly applying.
I see. Ma'am, actually, this is interesting because a lot of people that I know, even in my batch, are actively preparing for this exam in the hope that they'll get through and get an opportunity to be an LR. But you're saying that the prospects of that route might not be that high. So the better idea would be to try and intern with a judge.
Right. I mean, I'm obviously speaking from what I observed pre-pandemic, because I was at the Supreme Court physically from 2019 to 2020. 2020 to 21 was the peak pandemic period, and after that, I don't know if the process has changed or become more transparent. But at least in the 2 years I was there, the assessment I got was that. When it comes to clerkships, most people get in A through interning, B through direct applications. Sometimes what happens is that judges also might reach out to professors at law schools and ask for the recommendations, or to the vice chancellor, registrar, and they may ask them to send applications, and things like that also happen. So I think it depends from chamber to chamber how the selection process works. But yeah, that's the sense I got, that most people were getting in through that and not through the exam route.
I see. Ma'am, just as a connected route, a connected question from the discussion that we are currently in, how should someone then try to approach either the office of a judge or the LRs for a possible internship? Because if that's the best way to go about it, do you have any guidelines? Because I feel there's a lot there's that said about how you can get internships at law firms, at litigation chambers, but I don't suppose there's a lot of information
Right.
about interning with an honorable judge. So do you have some insights on that?
So first is try to check if a senior from the same college has interned or worked with a judge. That's the best way, and that way you can also get a recommendation if the senior has seen your work in college. Second is that I've recommended to a lot of people, maybe try cold messaging on LinkedIn. You never know. I think most people are chill enough to like at
Right.
least respond and give you at the email ID of the office, so you can maybe mail them. Third way I would say is that if you're interning with a senior advocate or working with them, or let's say you're at a law firm and you're with, say, a senior partner, they may have the contact numbers of the secretaries or offices of the judges, and they may be able to refer you, or at least let you know if there's any vacancy in the chambers. We also have clerks WhatsApp groups.
Okay.
So sometimes if somebody asks me, what I do is that I put out a message on the group saying, hey guys, if anybody has internship slots open, let me know, and if I can pass on the contact.
Oh, that's great.
uh, yeah, so it's not very systematic, but I mean, it really depends on, once you get to know someone in the network, then you can get some information.
Right. Just staying on the topic of internships and becoming an LR, while you were an LR, ma'am, I'm sure you must have handled several interns in your office and under your guidance. So, what are the tasks that are generally assigned to an intern? And of course, then we'll talk about what the role of an LR is actually, but let's cover the internship part first. So, what are the kind of tasks that are generally assigned to an intern? How can an intern do those tasks well and hope that they might be absorbed in that office? How to figure out which office has indeed vacancies to be absorbed in the first place?
I think you should basically apply everywhere,
I see.
because in any given office, there will be at least 700 applications just for the LR position.
Wow.
That's the number I had when we were recruiting during the pandemic. So I'm guessing internships, the number must be like,
Double, triple.
yeah, the secretaries would know better, since they are the ones who mostly handle the email outflow. So the intern's main responsibility is briefing, because again, it's very sensitive, the kind of judgments that are being handled. And even as a LR, you have to put in a lot of time to gain the trust of a judge so that they assign you like sensitive matters. So as an intern, mostly like I think 70 to 80% of your work will be briefs, and that's what will primarily be tested upon. But of course, if you're somebody who seems to be smart and you show promise, then you may be even, and depending on your skills with briefs, you may be given the chance to assist with research notes as well.
I
But
see.
the brief is mainly where both, I mean, the judge sees whether you have sufficient legal writing skills to be entrusted with more substantial like research assistance.
That's great. And again, I feel this, my next question, the answer to it would depend on office to office. But do interns also get an opportunity to interact with the judge that they are interning with?
So the judge that I was working with, Justice Shantanu Gowda, he was a very warm personality, and like there was no like sense of hierarchy in my office that
Right.
I'm a Supreme Court judge and I'm above you and nothing like that. So he interacted with everyone, and he used to invite us for snacks in his bungalow. And I think a lot of judges do that. Like I think that way the relationship between judges and LRs is very close to like a kind of parental or familial relationship where you're basically a part of their home. And he interacted with interns as well, and they also got an opportunity to be there when we were having any kind of group discussion. But like you said, it depends from office to office. Many judges may not be that interactive, and either because they don't have the bandwidth, or like again maybe they don't feel that comfortable trusting outsiders with like sensitive information. So it
In,
really depends on the personality of the individual judge you're working with.
I see. And now I'm coming to the actual responsibility and role of an LR. Could you walk us through what a regular day in your life as an LR looked like? Because from what I've heard, the job can be extremely taxing. It's not easy. Based on my conversation with other LRs, if someone thinks that it's not going to be as difficult as maybe working in a tier one law firm, perhaps they're misplaced in their understanding. So, could
Absolutely.
you please enlighten us on that area?
So again, very subjective, depends on which judge you're with. But if you're at a good office, it the ask can actually be equivalent to that of a law firm. And
Mm,
I have seen this with many of my friends and peers who are at judges' offices that working till 2 a.m., 3 a.m., especially if it's a very high profile constitution bench matter, or like coming into office at like 6 to 7 a.m. Depends on the preference of your judge, if they are a night person or a morning person.
right.
Again, personally, my boss was somebody who believed in a work life balance. So I, thankfully, in terms of work hours, did not have to like go through a lot of pain. And Sundays were always like off for us. Like Monday to Saturday was working, but Sunday was off. But again, there are many offices where, say, Friday is off, but Sunday is not off, or all 7 days you're required to come in, but like Sunday is kind of like a half day. So, it really depends on the judge and their kind of working style and whether they want their clerks to be there 24/7 or not. But yeah, it's certainly taxing. And in terms of the daily routine, it would be something like I like we used to come to office and we used to divide the files amongst ourselves. And obviously, some files are bulkier than others. And you basically go through the file, and it's an acquired skill because when you start out, you obviously feel like maybe I should read every page like top to corner and all, but the time is short.
Mm,
And you need to make sure that there are like 50 briefs lying on your judge's table at the end of the day. And you don't want to put them in a position where they have to read the file by themselves, because then your purpose is like essentially meaningless.
yeah.
So to kind of get that sense of how to read a file, how to know what's important, to understand that many a times in legal petitions people repeat the same things again and again.
Right.
And I think in that sense you learn a lot, because you realize what, even though you're not drafting, you realize the kind of patterns that are common in legal kind of like drafting, and you kind of see where what are the mistakes that lawyers make that make judges so irritated, because as a LR you feel so annoyed. You're like, yeah, I know why this matter is going to be dismissed. Um, and if you think it's important, then making sure that comes across in your brief and highlighting points which are controversial, and maybe pointing out to the judge that hey, they're citing this case, but it has actually been overruled, or it has been distinguished,
I
or
see.
it's not as authoritative as they're making it seem, or that they have cited the facts incorrectly, because parties do that as well. They'll
Wow.
very confidently cite a case and they'll just pretend that this favors us even though it doesn't. So as a clerk, it's your responsibility to point that out, because I feel like, especially on social media, it's very easy to be like harsh on judges and to be like, how could they not know that this has been overruled, and how could they not know that this is
Right.
being distinguished and all of that. But I mean, they're human, and I would say even practicing lawyers would probably like not know A to Z of like judgments on every topic. And
Sure.
a lot of these issues may be issues which they have never dealt with in their life. So as a clerk, there's a heavy responsibility on you to kind of explain it to them, and um, I mean, explain it in the sense that obviously they've practiced for 20 years, they know more than you. But like, if any topic you're reading for the first time, if somebody could just guide you through it and tell you that, what these counsels are saying is wrong or factually incorrect, and this is the right position of law, it just makes their job so much more easier. And when they're in court, they can tell the council confidently that, look, we've researched and we know what you're saying is wrong. So that's why then briefs become really important. We also used to take turns going to court so
Yeah.
that we could observe him, like, in person, and see how is it that they're kind of um, deciding how to dismiss or what to admit, and to see senior counsels arguing and to get their experience and how they interact. I think now a lot of judges don't require you to go to court in person, like you can just see it online. But I personally think seeing it in person is a
That's
much better experience qualitatively. And one good thing our boss used to do was that if we had worked on a research note specifically and he was going to deliver judgment, he would allow us to come to court, so that you get that satisfaction that I'm here for, like,
Hmm.
I mean, it's a 1 minute thing, it's not like a very grand announcement, but these are the kind of small pleasures that you take as a LR. And sometimes what used to happen was that in the middle of an argument, sometimes you would kind of see that a counsel was saying something wrong. So then when you go back to office, you kind of brief uh, the justice on the matters that have been argued, and you tell them that I know they argued this, but actually it was wrong. So you have
Hmm.
to maintain those notes so that when you go back, you can point out if something made sense or if it was right or wrong.
Right. Ma'am, you were an LR at the Supreme Court, but I'm sure you must know people who did the clerkship at the High Court level also. Do you find some differences when a person is an LR at the High Court or at the Supreme Court? What's the difference in terms of the tasks that the people are supposed to perform?
I have known of people who've interned at high courts with judges, but I don't know of anyone who's been a LR at a high
I
court.
see.
But I actually feel like the responsibilities there may be much greater, because at the high court level the matters would be more. So the workload on the judge would be more, and so more briefing, more research assistance required. But
Hmm.
unfortunately, the pay is lesser, and the kind of prestige, you could also say, is lesser. But I think responsibility wise, it's the same or more.
Right. I feel I was just speaking with an LR right now at the Delhi High Court, and I don't know if I'm right in saying that, but as far as I know, the pay parity is met now between LRs. at least at the Delhi High Court and the Supreme Court. But that is true. When I
Okay.
was looking at the notification for LRs at other high courts, their pay was significantly less, almost 50% less. So that is true. And on the topic of pay, ma'am, for people who are in Delhi, it'll be quite easy, I suppose, to live on the salary that you get as an LR, which is quite substantial. One can easily look it up on the internet. It's available publicly. But for someone, let's say, who's not from Delhi and then comes here, has to pay rent and has to figure out all the other expenses also, do you think the salary of an LR is sufficient at the Supreme Court to tide them over?
So, I mean, it's obviously not law firm level, that's for
Sure.
sure. And so, I mean, I can speak about this because I had come from Bombay to Delhi. Delhi rents are much better than Bombay rents, and the
Oh,
cost of living as well. So, I guess in that sense, it's not that much of a pinch. And I think you can actually live a good life as a LR, even if
right.
you're somebody who's come from outside. Sure, you might feel that your purchasing power is not the same as those of your friends who are working in law firms and earning twice the amount. But it's also not like a litigation lawyer situation where what you're earning is barely enough to cover your rent. I think it's
Right.
a good medium in between.
Hmm.
And I think you can save. Again, maybe not as much as people in law firms, but if you're like reasonable and about your expenditure, you can definitely save. And I lived a comfortable life. I don't think I compromised anywhere. Again, if you want to save up for a LLM, I
Ah,
might advise that you might want to do a couple of years in a law firm first, because you won't save enough for a LLM in this job. But yeah, it's not a bad place to be in financially.
right. Like ma'am wrote in her NLS Quark article, the pay is enough if you don't spend it on momos and in the Big Chill Cafe.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Ma'am, just a digression. As someone coming from Mumbai, how was life in Delhi as a legal professional for you like?
I loved it. I think apart from the air pollution, I mean I have no complaints with Delhi. I know that people say that Delhi is unsafe and the people are rude and all of that. But I honestly feel as a woman, and I've tweeted about this as well, I think in any city there are safe and unsafe pockets. And I think a lot of how what we perceive in terms of safety is like class coded. And there have been like moments in Bombay when I've been in a posh area and I have felt super unsafe and I have been in dangerous situations. And on the other hand, there have been times when I have traveled alone in Delhi in the evening and I have been perfectly fine. So I really don't think it's fair to judge a city on that basis,
Yeah.
that that there's a certain stereotype attached to it, and like I don't think that's true. The pollution is a problem, and that was an issue for me when I moved here.
Right.
But I do think the city has a very unique kind of like cultural and historical soul, which you may not find in other cities. So yeah, I liked my stay here, and I think as a clerk you will be like in the heart of Delhi, which is the Lutyens area, and
Right.
that area in terms of air quality, aesthetics,
Mm.
access to cultural resources and history and all is like that's the prime location. So
Right.
if you're an outsider, doing a clerkship is like the best way for you to experience Delhi.
Right. Thanks for that really honest answer. I'm sure that's going to help a lot of people. Ma'am, moving on, you touched briefly upon, Delhi being unsafe and those kind of things. But staying on that area, as a woman in a profession which requires you to work extremely late hours, and has that ever really been a consideration in your mind, or has that affected you in some ways, especially while you're an LR, because you're staying at a particular judge's residence also at some time till late in the night, and then you're having to travel to your place. Sometimes it could be very, very late into the night. Is that a consideration that people should take into account? Or like you said, if you're living in and around that area, things are going to be fine. It's not going to be much of a trouble.
So, like I said, the relationship between judges and LRs is familiar. And it's not like if you're a woman and you're working late till night, they're going to be oblivious. At least in my case, my judge was very clear that we should not be there in office beyond 8:30. And he would like scold us if we stayed like late, and he would just say there's no need. And he would like arrange for food if we ended up staying late. And
Oh,
he would also make sure that one of his aides would drop us to the metro station, or like he would ensure that somebody was there to see us off till the cab, because that area, it's totally high security,
sure. Yeah.
like you said. So it's not like anyway there's no chance that anything bad is going to happen to you, so long as you're in the vicinity of the residence. And I mean, we used to catch rides together and stuff. I think it's like in any other workplace, if you're going home late, like I don't think there's ever a situation where I was alone and I was leaving late from work. Like all of us would generally leave together. Like it was always like at least one more person would be there. And even otherwise, like judges know, and they will send somebody to like take care and make sure that you're dropped off safely. So yeah, I don't think that was ever an issue for me.
Right. And ma'am, moving on to the next question, how should one choose a particular judge that they might want to intern with? Of course, now there are certain celebrity judges in every court that
Right.
people want to intern under. But what's your intern and BLRs for? But what's your take on choosing the right office?
So I am personally not a big fan of the celebrity judge culture, because I think being a LR to a judge is a very different experience as compared to just admiring them and their jurisprudence from
Right.
afar. I mean, obviously, that is a factor in deciding which judge you want to work with. The roster of matters that they handle, which is publicly available on the Supreme Court website, that's your best way to kind of guess like what's. I mean, sure, rosters keep changing, but the core matters they handle will usually remain the same. So looking at the roster lets you know what kind of matters you'll be doing daily briefings for. So it's not like every day you'll be working on a consti bench matter. Like you need to be clear that a lot of the matters that come to the Supreme Court are like your ordinary litigations that you also see at the High Court level. So if you're into arbitration, pick a judge who does arbitration matters. If you're into tax, pick someone who has a lot of tax on their roster. If you're into criminal law, then pick somebody with criminal law, and so on.
Yeah.
And look at their previous work at while they were a high court judge, and if like ideology or something like that is a consideration for you, then you can also assess from that how they usually decide. But the main most important thing is how interactive the judge is and how good they are to their clerks.
Yeah.
Because that familial relationship which I was talking about, it's there in most offices, but it need not be there in all offices. Like I said, many judges they prefer not to interact for whatever reasons with their clerks.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any point to doing a LR ship just to get a letter.
Yeah.
Even a letter has no meaning if the judge uh, cannot offer the admissions committee personal insight into your character. I think that's something that a lot of people miss out on. They feel that, oh, because the Supreme Court judge is writing a letter for me, my admission is guaranteed. But that's not the case, because everybody who's doing a LR ship is applying for LLM, like 90% of them,
Right.
either LLM or like preparing for judicial service. So, like, I'm sure admissions committees must be getting at least 15, 20 recommendation letters from Indian Supreme Court judges every year, and they will assess you against the other candidates, and they will see whose recommendation letter is more personal. I think I really benefited because my judge interacted a lot with all of us, and he had a very good sense of who we were as people. we were not like just numbers or faces to him. Like he knew us as personalities, and we got to learn a lot because he shared a lot about his insights when he was a lawyer and his challenges as a practicing lawyer and as a judge. And that's the kind of soft skills which you are not going to pick up like anywhere else.
Yeah.
And that those kind of life experiences and observations, a lot of which are shared in confidence, and you're not going to get that even from reading a news interview or a biography, which tends to be more sanitized. um, and I think I really benefited from having a judge who was so interactive and so friendly with us. And I've heard stories of judges who are totally on the opposite end and like don't speak, or they're very horrible to their clerks. And I don't think you'll gain anything out of that kind of experience. So I think it's really important to verify with people who worked there earlier what the environment is like, and whether the judge is somebody who's invested in the LR's well-being.
Right. There's one point you said in your answer that I want to unpack a little. You said that people who are LRs either go for an LLM. That's a thing that everyone is mostly aware of. You also said, or they are either judiciary aspirant. Now that's new, because I thought that being an LR is an all time consuming task, and many of our viewers are judiciary aspirants. So I want to know, is it possible to do that rigorous preparation while being an LR? Did you know of people who did that?
So there are civil service aspirants also who do the LR-ship.
Wow.
I think again it depends on your equation with a particular judge. It could be that you've already done a LR-ship for 1 year and you're staying on a second year to train the incoming clerks. But like you've been also been given the leeway to like do your own thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's something you can negotiate with the individual judge. But yeah, I think a lot of people do it because like I said, you get a good sense of what being a judge is really like. So in that sense, it might be helpful to judiciary aspirants to do LRship.
Interesting. And now, ma'am, coming on to the next question. Like you said in the start of the interview, you were very clear that you wanted to do a foreign LLM, and also that a letter from an honorable justice would hold you in good stead. So clearly, if someone wants to pursue an LLM, the LRship is a great option. But for someone, let's say, who wants to enter litigation or eventually wants to go into corporate law, how useful or not useful is the LRship going to be?
So for corporate law, I would say don't bother. Um, See, I mean, then it's just a prestige thing.
Yeah.
Even if for somebody who wants to go into litigation, I think it's definitely very helpful, because you get a lot of insights that you will not get as a litigating lawyer. Like I said, I feel like litigating lawyers, especially on social media, often judge justices very harshly. They have a very idealistic notion of how adjudication works, which I also did when I was in law school. And they also have a very idealistic notion of how pleading should work. And there were many times as a LR when I would get messages from people who had appeared before my boss saying that how could he dismiss this matter and it's so important and things like that. But I think when you work as a LR and you see your boss and you see the kind of conflicts that go on in their mind, that really makes you aware of the real challenges that are involved. And you understand that okay, it's very easy to like sit on your armchair and be like, judges should do this and that. And I'm not saying that judges are gods and they are beyond criticism. There are many grounds for legitimate criticism, obviously, but I think being a LR gives you a perspective which you might not have if you go into practice straight away. So, in that sense, doing it for 1 year and then going on to join litigation is, I think, helpful. Uh, though I would say don't do it for more than 1 year because then it's just repetitive.
Right.
But for somebody who wants to be a corporate lawyer, I feel like LRship is something people do as a break from corporate law. Like I think they do it when you've spent a few years in a firm and now you're considering a LLM, and that's the stage where they do a LRship. I don't think for your initial years it's helpful. I think it's better that, and this is something I wish I had done personally. I think it's better that you get the whole A0 like difficulties out of the way,
Right.
and you just get done with that process, and you see what a firm works like, and you see whether that works for you or not, that kind of lifestyle. And then you can take a call on whether you want to do a LR-ship or a LLM or something that is different from your conventional corporate.
Right. Thanks for that again. And I quickly move to the final set of questions that I have. Uh, Ma'am, this is something that you touched again in your NLS Quark article also. We see that whenever an honorable justice of the Supreme Court either retires or becomes the chief, we see, people who have been their LRs post very enduring photos with them, which is wonderful. And it again shows the close relationship, the tight-knit relationship that's shared between the judges and the judges' LRs. But so, I mean, as an outsider, it would give an impression that, oh my God, this is so wonderful. You get to be best friends with a judge of a Supreme Court who's a constitutional authority. But what's the reality? I mean, is it really as wonderful as that? Do you really form long lasting relationships, or is the relationship more one way, where the LR is obviously more enthusiastic about posting photos, whereas the judge might not reciprocate those feelings? I'm just thinking out loud of the possibilities. Of course, I have no experience of this, so I want you to talk to us about this.
I think it's very subjective. I can't speak for other people. I mean, I don't know what goes on in their chambers, but I can definitely speak for myself that all of us who are with Justice Shantanu Gowda have very warm memories of him, and it was real. I
Yeah.
know it's difficult to believe, and I mean that cynicism is always there. That what is all this, and I'm sure it's just show, and I'm sure the judge doesn't care or whatever. But I really, and I think that's the case for all law clerks, because whenever you speak to any LR about their boss, you will always see them get a little bit defensive.
Yeah.
And I think that bias is always there, which is why I said familial relationship, because you do end up seeing them as like parental figures. Of course, there are many people who've had bad experiences and they might say otherwise, but generally, people tend to be very protective of
Hmm.
the judges they work for, and it's for good reason. I do think most judges, again, maybe not all, but most of them are pretty invested and they do take good care of you.
Right.
And I can definitely speak for my boss that he was very warm and very caring. And we still say that he spoiled us, because I mean, obviously, you don't get that like in the real world when you go on to like other jobs. I mean, it's not to say that your bosses in other jobs are like bad, but that kind of fatherly treatment,
Hmm.
like I don't think like you can ever expect in any other job. But yeah, it was definitely special, and I will always have good memories of him.
That's great. That's wonderful, especially in the legal profession, which can be a little odd at some
Toxic,
points. Yeah.
yeah.
So these kind of things really, really, enthuse one with passion to move forward with whatever one wants to do. Ma'am, another thing, you said that it'll be better if someone wants to either litigate or go into cop law to not do an LRship for more than a year. But you were very clear that you had to do a foreign LLM. But I think you did it for 2 years. I think you got an extension. So, what were your motivations? Why did you decide to do an extended period of the LRship?
So honestly, I think even for a foreign LLM, 1 year is enough.
Hmm.
You don't necessarily need 2 years. But I think for me, it was just that I had that kind of bond with the judge I was working for, where he needed a senior clerk to be there to kind of handle the transition when the next batch came in. And I think that would be the case for a lot of offices, that many judges will ask clerks to stay on, if not for the whole year, then maybe for 2, 3 months, just to kind of oversee the process when the new people come in. Because it's required because like it might sound easy, briefing and research notes and all, but
Yeah.
it actually does take some time to pick up. And I also had the benefit of a senior who was there for a year before me, and she also stayed on for a second year, and she was the one who guided us. So that's the reason I stayed on for a second year. And also I guess I was spoiled, and it was a great office, and if not for the pandemic, I think I would have had a better experience. The pandemic kind of ruined it.
Right.
But yeah, but I think from a strategic perspective, a second year is can be dispensed with, because in a clerkship at the end of the day, there's no like career growth as such. Like there's
Mhm.
no promotion. You might unofficially be a senior clerk, but it doesn't get you more benefits on paper.
Right.
So which is why I think it's okay to like do it for a year and then move on to other things.
Hmm. And now, ma'am, that now that we're running short of time, and I don't want to keep you for long because I'm sure you have other things to do now that you're a corporate lawyer. So just a couple of more quick fun questions. Now that you have, ma'am, donned several hats, you've been an LR, you have also done a foreign LLM, you've taught at National Law School, which for all practical purposes is one of the finest law schools of our country, and now you're a corporate lawyer. Which of these three things has excited you the most?
That's a difficult question. I can't speak as to excitement, because I feel like in any job there will always be periods which you might feel like this is so boring, and there might
Right.
be phases when you feel like wow, I'm loving it. Uh, but I would say in terms of enjoyment, I mean, I really feel like, I mean, I can't speak for corporate law actually just yet because I've just started.
Mhm.
It's only been 2 weeks, so I think it's too soon to speak about that now. But I think I mean, barring that, so far I've enjoyed my LR ship the most. But that's also because it was my first job, my first time kind of like adulting away from home outside of a college context. And like I said, my boss was really great, my colleagues
Mhm.
were really great, and um I had a good time, and it was a good kind of, like, I think for a lot of people, that first year after college is when most people join a law firm and they have a horrible time, and they're like,
Yeah,
what am I doing, and this is so bad. And I didn't have to go through any of that. So in that sense, I think that was a really good year for me.
that's wonderful. And ma'am, what do you think going ahead? Do you wish to continue being a corporate lawyer, or do you have other plans also, or is it too soon to say?
It's too soon to say.
Right, right. So, ma'am, as a final question, this is something that I ask all the guests on the show. And since you're a movie buff, I'm sure we'll get some wonderful answers. I usually ask the guests to recommend something to our viewers. It could be books, it could be movies. It doesn't necessarily need to be law based, though it could be revolving around law. I don't mind that. Any books, movies that you find are wonderful and our viewers will enjoy reading or watching them?
So books I would recommend, especially for women who are watching this or desperately seeking Shahrukh.
Oh,
I
yes.
think men should also actually men also really need to read it,
Yes.
because it gives an insight into like what is it that like modern Indian women are like looking for in their partners. And it's also a very good economic analysis of like how women's decision making power has kind of changed or not changed when it comes to romantic relationships with liberalization in India. It's a very fascinating, very interesting book. So I would suggest reading that. In terms of movies and shows, I've just started watching Succession and I'm binging it like anything.
That's
I
wonderful. It's a
think it's
great show.
great, and it's a great show. And I've also been watching House of the Dragon, and
Mm.
I've really liked that as well. So yeah.
That's great. Lovely. And I think with that, we can come to an end of today's conversation. Ma'am, thank you so incredibly much for taking time out of your schedule and speaking with me. I'm sure your insights will be of great, great value to anyone who wants to chart out a career path similar to yours. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sarthak. It was wonderful to do this.